Welcome to another Kundalini After Dark session. I'm your host, Brent Spirit, and I'm here on Zoom with a handful of community members. We've got a few tuning in on YouTube. Thank you all so much for joining me once again live on a Sunday night to talk all about the Kundalini awakening process. Today, I'll be sharing a little bit about some of the practices that we can explore throughout our Kundalini awakening process. We'll be kind of unpacking that a little bit. The main theme and what we'll be talking about is when to practice which practices. Some practices are great, but they're not, ideal for certain points on the path. So this is what we'll be unpacking a little bit today. I'm going to open the floor to get the input of some of the community members here with us live as well on audio, video, or of course in the chat. And we can take the conversation in any direction. Of course, anything goes related to Kundalini awakening, spiritual emergence. Maybe you've got some questions for the community. I'm going to open the floor up to ask questions, to respond to questions, to get some dialogue going back and forth. Maybe you've got some interesting experiences you'd like to share with us all, just to know that you're being heard by people who understand. That is totally welcome here as well. Maybe you want to vent, cry, complain. We're here for that too. This is a challenging journey. It's exciting. It's difficult. So we're here for all of that. So we'll see where our conversation goes. If you're listening to the recording in the archive, you can join us for the next After Dark session. Visit brentspirit.com/afterdark to register. If you're tuning in on Spotify and you haven't already, if you can leave a rating for the show, I'd really appreciate that. It goes a really long way. You can hit follow, like, subscribe, comment, all that stuff on YouTube. It goes a long way too. Thank you so much for all of your support over the years. This is really, really incredible for me to see this growing, and it gives me purpose. And I feel like I'm doing my mission. I'm completing my mission with the help of everyone here. My mission, of course, is to raise awareness about Kundalini. So thank you all so much. And a very, very special thank you to all those that have offered a donation at any point. It goes a long way. It allows me to do this. So thank you so much. So let's dive into this now. Let's talk about Kundalini awakening practices. So I've got a bit of a diagram here I want to open up. So what I'm going to do on the Zoom call is see if I can spotlight myself for everyone. I hope that's the right thing. Spotlight. So I've got this chart here to demonstrate some of these practices and when we might want to use these practices. So it's a very simple diagram. On the horizontal axis, which I guess is the only axis, I don't know. We've got the pre-Kundalini awakening stage. Then in the middle, we've got a marker, which marks, the Kundalini awakening experience. And then after that, we have the post-Kundalini awakening stage of the journey, right? So sometimes people think, or they may feel that, any spiritual practice is safe and applicable at any point along the spiritual journey. So they go through a Kundalini awakening experience. They're getting some sort of Kundalini stirring or some sort of Kundalini phenomena, and they think, oh, I'm going through Kundalini awakening. That means I've got to engage in some really intense spiritual practices. I heard Kundalini is about the third eye. So let me look up on YouTube some third eye meditations. That must be what I'm supposed to do. So then they maybe, do an intense third eye meditation. Or maybe they hear that, Kundalini has something to do with psychedelics, or psychedelics has something to do with spiritual awakening. And of course, they totally can. They totally do. So they may think, well, I'm going through Kundalini awakening. Maybe psychedelics is what I need to do. So they take psychedelics and they have a really intense experience, and maybe more than they can handle, right? Or maybe they think about breath work and they think, oh, I've seen some yogis engaging in intense breath work. Maybe that's what I've got to do. I've got to engage in some really intense breathing practices. Of course, once the Kundalini begins to move through our system, we don't necessarily need to engage in all these intense practices. So there are some practices that I like to break down into pre-Kundalini awakening practices and then post-Kundalini awakening practices. So when I refer to Kundalini awakening, I'm referring to the point on the journey, which is a bit of a, for some people, it's a very obvious point, that they have a massive energetic rising, energetic explosion of prana, of Shakti moving up the spinal columns. That's a very obvious sign of a Kundalini awakening process. But for others, it's much more hard to discern. But nonetheless, they're having a rather intense spiritual emergence process, spiritual awakening process involving all sorts of energetic phenomena, kriyas, going into deep meditation, all sorts of things like that can begin to happen. So the pre-Kundalini awakening practices. So let's take a person who's got no Kundalini phenomena going on. They're not going through Kundalini awakening process. So they maybe engage in something like what I would call here active or effortful practices. So they engage in what we may call forced pranayama, forced breath work. So they go to a breathwork class, or they watch a video on YouTube, or they follow some book or some guidance online that says breathe intensely in and out through your nose as fast as you can for as many rounds, 30 rounds, 40 rounds, who knows, right? These practices can absolutely be effective at awakening this Kundalini force, this Kundalini energy, can stir it, can cause it to begin to rise, right? So it triggers an awakening. It's effective. It's powerful. These are ways that it's done, right? Some may engage in raising the energy through visualizations, imagining energy rising up the spine, right? This can help as well, for sure. You can link breath work with visualizations as well. It can be very effective for raising Kundalini. Now, this is, of course, practices that, somebody who hasn't really had much of an awakening going on, they can engage in these practices and then begin to go through an awakening. The same goes for, going to see a teacher, a guide, a guru who offers what's called Shaktipat, which is the transmission of Shakti from one person to another. This can be a very powerful practice as well. So this can also awaken the Kundalini in a person as well. Like I said, psychedelics, plant medicine, ayahuasca, mushrooms, right? We engage in those explorations. This can also trigger Kundalini awakening. So in most people, not necessarily, but in some people, absolutely, right? We can also engage in forced yoga practices, yoga poses, right? We can engage in forced kriyas. So various yogic practices. Sometimes, if you go to Kundalini yoga, they have a series of kriyas that you can engage in. And some of these kriyas can, of course, stir up this Shakti force, this Kundalini awakening force. So these are all very powerful practices that can be used to awaken Kundalini. Now, personally, I don't recommend them because they're very powerful. Often those who engage in them don't know exactly what they're working towards, right? Meaning a powerful Kundalini awakening, they may not know. And so many of us here in this community, I'm myself included, I'm one of them. Maybe we explore some or all of these types of practices, just exploring them out of curiosity. And then suddenly we're having a full-blown Kundalini awakening, turns into a bit of a crisis, and we're having a really hard time, right? But the fact of the matter is these practices can help to awaken Kundalini, of course. Now, I don't recommend any of these practices per se. As a teacher speaking to a big audience here, I don't recommend any of these practices. I don't recommend engaging in forceful breathing or forceful pranayama practices. I don't really recommend even engaging in drawing energy up with visualizations. I don't really recommend going to somebody to get Shaktipat, especially not if it's somebody that's on tour who comes to your country, gives you Shaktipat, and then leaves and isn't available to support you. I don't recommend that either. Psychedelics, I don't really recommend that either for Kundalini awakening. In general, of course, there's lots of benefits there, but proper intention, guidance, preparation, a plan to use them intentionally is definitely highly recommended. Yoga poses, now depending on our intentions for yoga, some very intense yoga practices, I don't really recommend them per se. I recommend more gentle practices. Forced kriyas to awaken Kundalini, I don't really recommend them either, unless you're working with a very astute teacher that's available to support you when things get difficult. That's not going to abandon you. That's not going to act confused when things get difficult for you. That's what I recommend. So overall, these active and effortful practices, I would steer clear of them personally, knowing what I know now. If you happen to have engaged in them in the past or have been engaging them and it's going well for you, by all means, continue doing what you're doing. You don't have to listen to me. It's just some ideas I'm sharing to spark some conversation here. If in the past you engage in them, it's okay. No problem. No problem. You can always find balance. Eventually, it's not like if you're having a hard time now, it's not like you've completely made a big mistake and you're, completely broken beyond repair. Not at all. Not at all. So that's my take on the active and effortful practices. They can definitely serve to awaken Kundalini. But once we have a major energetic rising, or once we begin to have very obvious Kundalini phenomena, I would be quite adamant in saying we should stop engaging in those practices, these active, forceful practices. Don't need to push beyond the point of an awakening. Once we have an awakening, we can relax. Okay, now the energy is going to do what it's going to do. It's been awakened, whether we did it intentionally or not, whether we did it with support or guidance or not. The energy is awakened. Now we can take a step back and just allow it to run its course. Okay. So what do we do then? What practices do we engage in then after we've had some sort of energetic rising? Well, I go to the second set of practices, which I call the spontaneous or the passive practices, right? So these practices, we can engage in them at any point of the journey. Any point of the journey, they're safe. Nothing can go wrong. It's all good. Okay. Whether you're an absolute beginner that has no Kundalini phenomena whatsoever, or whether you're the most advanced yogi on the planet, these practices are safe, applicable, and they're very effective for deepening our spiritual awakening, our spiritual emergence, or our state of yoga, right? So these are the passive and spontaneous practices. So we have spontaneous pranayama, spontaneous breath work, spontaneous yoga poses, spontaneous kriyas. You'll note that I'm not saying forced, right? Not active, but spontaneous, more passive. So once the Kundalini begins to awaken, we may go spontaneously into organic, natural breath work. Begins to happen through us. It happens at the perfect intensity, the perfect time, or the perfect length of time. It's all perfect. We don't have to have our ego involved in it. It just happens exactly what our system needs at the right time. Perfect, right? Our system knows that when it's too much, the system will automatically stop. When it's not enough, the system will amp it up. So we can trust the intelligence of the system, the body, the Shakti, however you like to think about it. Same goes for yoga poses. We don't need to go to a yoga class anymore, listening to someone else telling us what to do. We can lay on our mat and just surrender and allow the yoga poses to happen spontaneously, because this is the origin of all yoga anyway. It all originated spontaneously within yogis who are going through Kundalini awakening, right? So we can engage in it spontaneously. Same goes for kriyas, right? We don't need to go to a Kundalini yoga class and have somebody else tell us what to do. The kriyas that we need at the perfect time will happen, right? When we just go into the spontaneous and passive state. We can practice unconditional awareness meditations, right? Once again, it's a passive practice. So we just abide as awareness, allowing whatever thoughts, emotions, feelings, sensations, experiences to arise within our system and to pass away. No judgment. We just observe and allow. All is welcome, right? Passive, very effective, very effective. We can engage in self-love. So that just means to me, allowing ourselves to feel, think, or experience anything that may arise and saying, I love you, no matter what is going on. I love you. I love you. I love you. Right. So I would put my hands in my heart and I would just say, I love you. I love you. I love you to any thought, emotion, feeling, sensation, head to toe. I would drench it all in a white, purple, golden light, golden liquid light that I would refer to as love. So that was a very safe practice I found very effective. Practicing mindfulness, right? Just becoming aware of what's happening in the moment without judgment, becoming aware of the sensations in our body without judgment. Okay, just practicing mindfulness. Very safe, very effective. Can be practiced at any point of the journey. Now, of course, I should add a caveat here. Practicing mindfulness has the potential to stir up some trauma. If we have a very traumatic background, it can stir some things up, right? When we kind of get out of the way and relax, some things can come up. So it's important that we engage in these practices with a bit of awareness that some dormant material may begin to emerge. And we should have some sort of container where we are able to go to process what comes up, ideally having some support in place, but knowing that whatever's coming up is coming up to be healed and released. So generally speaking, especially compared to those more active practices, the passive practices, they're quite safe, okay? You can engage in bhakti or devotional practices, chanting, prayer, just prostrations, being in nature and just, in a state of reverence, in a state of gratitude and appreciation for the universe, for God, whatever it may be. Bhakti and devotional practices involve an emotional connection to something higher power that isn't separate from us. So we celebrate that, right? This is worship, right? This is what bhakti is. Never goes out of style. Always an opportunity to go deeper and deeper with bhakti practices, okay? So one of the examples that came to me when I was thinking about this was, if you think of Ram Dass's guru, Neem Karoli Baba Maharaji, right? He's a saint. He's as enlightened as it gets, right? And so still he would be engaging in bhakti and devotional practices, right? It doesn't stop for him, right? So somebody once found his journal and they opened it up and, they just saw pages and pages and pages of the word, the name of God, Ram, R-A-M, Ram, right? He's just practicing devotion to Ram, just writing his name out over and over and over again, right? You don't really hear stories of Neem Karoli Baba engaging in, pranayama, right? Trying to do breath work and forcing things to happen. But devotion, right? That's all that's left. And there's no end to how deeply we can go into devotional states. Once again, very, very safe practice and applicable at any point along the journey. Absolute beginner, absolutely the most advanced yogi on the planet, bhakti, right? And finally, one of the, of course, most effective practices, the passive and spontaneous practice, is surrender, right? Just surrender to something higher, knowing that, thy will, not mine, right? Going with whatever's arising within our system, trusting in the intelligence of our system, of our Shakti, which is beyond our mind, beyond our ego, trusting, surrendering, right? Any point of the journey, we can engage in those practices. So that's why on my chart here, I've got this section for the passive and spontaneous practice extending all the way from the beginning of the pre-Kundalini stage, past the Kundalini awakening stage, and then, of course, to the post-Kundalini awakening stage. And the arrow just keeps going. It just keeps going. It doesn't stop. Whereas for the active and effortful practices, after the Kundalini awakening happens, I recommend, ideally, as a teacher speaking to an audience here, we stop, right? We don't need to engage in intense psychedelics or intense forced kriyas or intense breath work. We just stop. And then we can turn to the passive and spontaneous practices and allow them to carry us forward. So I'm curious to hear from everyone else about your take on what I'm sharing here. Can absolutely disagree. I encourage it. I want to hear about your experience. I know that some that are having, really powerful Kundalini awakenings engage in a daily routine of breath work, or they go to yoga class and they find a lot of benefit from it, or they've had lots of benefits from psychedelics. I know that, what I'm sharing here is not black and white. It's just a bit of a map for those who may be having some difficulty, maybe a little confused. They're saying, I heard Kundalini awakening has something to do with breath work, so I started doing breath work and now can't sleep because my third eye is so active. Well, maybe we can, put some more attention on the passive and spontaneous practices, and that could bring some balance to our system and allow the intelligence within to carry us forward, So I'll wrap it up there. I want to hear from everybody else here, hear about your thoughts about some of the practices that you like to engage in. Maybe you've had some great benefits from practices. Maybe you've had some practices that you can look back on and say, yeah, that was too intense. I shouldn't push too hard. I don't want to say my lesson, but yeah, you could say, I learned my lesson. It's not necessary to push. Can relax and allow the intelligence of the body to carry us forward. Maybe you've got some questions for the group. Maybe you've got some responses to some questions. We'd love to hear from you. You can type it in the chat. You can jump on the call, audio or video, and we'll see where it goes. And if you're listening in on YouTube, you can type in the chat as well. But I'd invite you to click the link and join us on the Zoom call, or we can all engage a bit more together. So let's see what comes up in our conversation here. Once again, this is Kundalini After Dark. You can share whatever's on your mind. You can take us off topic. It's not a problem at all. We'll just kind of go with the flow. And before I go over here to Samia, who's got her hand up, I want to invite you to check out kundaliniawareness.org as well as brentspirit.com. Both brentspirit.com, lots of free content there, lots of different talks related to Kundalini. Kundaliniawareness.org, we've got a directory of licensed mental health professionals with direct personal lived Kundalini experience, as well as some stories by others that have gone through their Kundalini awakening process. If you'd like to submit your story, really appreciate having your story in the collection. Kundaliniawareness.org also has a list of books, a list of videos, a list of peer support groups, lots of support there for you. Thank you all so much for dropping by today. So now let's go over to Samia.
Good evening.
Hey, Samia. Good evening.
Oh, okay. Hey, I'm glad you brought this back up. Hi everybody. Hi fam. So the list you went through was so funny because I did most of the things you're not supposed to do, but I didn't know. I didn't know better. Especially at the beginning and not knowing going through my awakening that, prayers were, and I thought it was just shakes from other stuff I'm getting off of or other practices. And so I did the mushroom therapy trip, and I did some DMT, and I got some enlightenment. And then I didn't think this last part thoroughly, but I went through, Bufo ritual initiation type of ceremony. And that was really, really intense. So the psychedelics going through an awakening is highly not suggested as well for me, from my own experience. It was very, very intense, and it made my initial trip that was supposed to be maybe 20 minutes with this beautiful plant animal medicine, it was for 8 days. And then I had an 8 day trip, and I did it with a group of friends and people, and we were very close. And everybody kept checking on me, and we were texting each other. And I would have like things happen to me through the daytime, and I see through the matrix, like I see geometric signs like flaming in different colors when I close my eyes. I was all over the place in astral. Like I had some really wild experiences that initially probably would have been cool for 8 hours, but 8 days later, you're wondering like what's going on. So, I mean, I didn't know. I went through all the experiences and I didn't know. I got a wealth of knowledge. I went through a lot of fears, and got through to the other side. But I highly suggest anybody that is going through this awakening process, please be very mindful in what you take in and any type of psychedelics or anything else you want to try with it, because what my experience went through, I would never want anybody else to go through in their life. But I did, well, a wealth of knowledge from it. I walked through a lot of fears and still am. And then looking back on it, which is about almost to be a year, I think, in December or January, I've been through a lot, and I came out the other side. Now life still shows up and different things have happened since then, but I can look back on that and be like, I survived that. I learned my lesson and got great wisdom. And I know I can conquer everything, and it's this too shall pass. Anything's gonna pass in my life because I went through that for 8 days. Like I couldn't believe what I went through for 8 days. And even after that, for weeks after, because the veil was thin, and my awareness and everything was just open. I had after effects of different phenomena was happening, but it just seemed like times 100, I guess. I don't know, but it's very good advice. I did even I think back then I remember talking to you once or twice, and then even getting your program, which was very instrumental. I still do one of the meditations that you talk about. I see you, I love you, namaste. When I'm going through my roughest times, I go right to that. To this day, and I really, really thank you. I'm not trying to boost your head, but it was a really good course. It was very beneficial for the time. Short segments where you can focus and understand and get to where you need to get to, what parts of you're struggling with. So it was just very, very good information, and it was key to the darkest times in my life. But I just recently I've moved and been going through a lot of changes and career and trying to figure things out, and making no money to a little money, and in this process. And I forgot, we get busy and trying to figure out how we're going to keep a roof over our head and everything else. I forgot simple practices like making space, and making space for all these feelings coming up. And my life really, really went through a downward spiral because I didn't make space. I didn't make space for movement. I didn't make space to, feel the other emotions. I didn't make space, and everything was kind of coming unraveled. And so I started doing that. And instantly, as soon as I started making space again for, okay, I'm gonna make space for you when I come home from work, or at midday, I'm gonna make space for you to, have all these feelings and everything you want to come up, come up. And then, I do a nice little gratitude thing at the end. It's so important to make space for this energy and to honor every part of it, the darkness, the anger, the jealousy, the resentment. It's so important to honor all that, because that's all parts of us. And I had to. It took me a long time realizing, been coming back to these meetings and listening. It's all parts of me, and to love each part of that. And so I do that practice, and it just instantly put me back on track. Like instant, like the next day, I was like, wow, this is freaking powerful. It's powerful. So like, thank you again. And then another practice I do that I imagine, especially when I'm going through it and feel like, maybe going through a dark night of the soul, the mini version. I just picture my younger self, my smaller self, my child self. I picture my higher self. This is this beautiful winged angel type dragon, Pleiadians type woman. And I picture all of them hugging myself and just saying, I love you. I see you, namaste. So all three of us are hugging my present self, my past self, and my future self. And that really takes me out of a lot of darkness too. So thank you. Thank you, group. Like, listen, like we're all here for each other. You're not here alone. We're not here alone, so thank you, group. And I love all y'all. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Samia.
Mm.
So much love. So much love. Thank you. Oh, you shared so much great value and wisdom there. Let's just take a moment just to let it land. Yeah, thank you for going through that 8-day trip. Wow. I mean, I shouldn't laugh, but
No,
I'm
it's
happy.
funny now.
Yeah.
It's funny. It's freaking funny now. But eight
Yeah.
days of I had to stay with people. I was seeing things. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I mean, the Matrix. I
Oh,
saw the Matrix. I saw things flaming. I was out of my body. It was, yeah. It's funny now because I can't wait to write a book on this or a movie. It's really funny now, but then it wasn't. But it was hilarious now. So go on. I'm sorry.
no, don't apologize at all. I like the engagement. Yeah, I mean, 8 days. This is exactly what I was talking about when I was trying to say, hey, psychedelics can definitely be powerful and helpful, but once this awakening happens, ideally put a halt to it. But also I should jump in, just like you were saying, Samia, you engaged in all those practices. You didn't know any better. Neither did I. That's how I was able to put together this whole chart and everything, because I thought, what did I kind of do? What have I observed in others? But most of the stuff I engage in myself, right? I was exploring all these different practices, and I would say, okay, this is like I'm adding too much fuel to the fire here unnecessarily. So that was part of my process too. So I look back and I say, yeah, no regrets. I learned a lot, just like you said, you learned a lot. You understood you could conquer anything. So overall, it's a win. But for those out there listening who may be hearing what we're saying, we don't want to, you don't have to go through all of that intensity. Uh, you don't have to, right? Engaging in the passive practices, the beautiful practices like Simi had shared with self-love, holding yourself, loving all your parts, right? Those are very safe practices that can be engaged in at any point along the way, any point along the way. Beautiful, beautiful share. Yeah, you were sharing about, the different parts, embracing all the different parts. It reminds me of internal family systems work. No bad parts, right? There's no bad parts. Jealousy, anxiety, fear, all welcome. No bad parts at all. Amazing. Amazing. Red Pill Queen's sharing here. I can't imagine tripping balls for 8 days. Neither can I. Nice. Lots of love for Samia in the chat. BB sharing here. My thoughts obsessively loop. I have a trauma background in this life. I wish I could let go. I wish Shakti would clean my busy mind lovingly. Yeah, it can be quite challenging. Quite challenging. I don't know too much about your experience, so I apologize if I'm off, but what's coming to me is, when I was going through obsessive looping thoughts, a very racing mind, lots of material, psychological content arising, I recognize that as the clearing and the cleaning and the purification process. So all of that stuff surfacing, if I was able to witness it without pushing it away, without over identifying with it, I recognize that it was like a flood pushing all of this stuff to the surface to be released. So I just sat with it. I allowed it. I observed it. It was uncomfortable, absolutely uncomfortable. But eventually breaks came. And in those breaks, I was more peaceful and more quiet and more centered than ever before. I felt more lighter and I thought, oh, okay, maybe all of that mental content that's arising, all that emotional content that's arising, it's actually arising to be pushed out rather than recycled over and over and over again within my system. Maybe it's actually arising to be pushed out. So that's what I found. So perhaps this is part of your cleaning and clearing process. Perhaps.
Just wanted to share some things that I did that were stupid. or incorrect. Let's say one was, many of you have heard of Dr. Joe Dispenza, I guess his name is, who does the pineal gland, some kind of breathing for that. That can really knock you off your center if you overindulge in it. In fact, I wouldn't ever do it again unless I had an expert in it in Kundalini yoga present, because it does. Not people are going to go do it, of course, because it really does open the pineal gland, and you can. I mean, and I fell right back, collapsed onto my butt when doing it, because my entire body began to feel as though it was having some kind of uh, uh, orgasm to the 10th power in my head. Particularly, I went right through into. So, I mean, it's good for that, but if you're not prepared for that kind of thing, and if your Kundalini is awakened, it might put you a little bit too far, like an 8-day drug experience. Sorry, Sammy, for laughing, but oh God, having had some bad trips myself, that would be horrifying. Yeah, so just beware of that. And as for the other thing, if Shaktipat, some of the literature, person gives you Shaktipat, tells you to go sit and meditate, and you have no idea what's really going to happen. You may have read some things, you may even things about that are disturbing and scary, but just sitting. There's a lot. I think traditionally there's a lot of preparation work done before receiving Shaktipat. Lots of preparation work, like a decade or two prior. In the case of, so I looked at on the 15 years of wandering around and working with different yogis, different gurus to clean out, and still he was contemplating ending his life because of the intensity of the experience. So Shaktipat's great, but if you have any traumatic background, that's what I was aiming at to talk about, is that what I've learned recently, having taken EMDR, which some of you are familiar with, and also hypnotherapy, both of those can be used to reduce the anxiety caused by extreme anxiety, the anxiety caused by extreme anxiety. Great. Reduce the anxiety caused by trauma, childhood trauma, or other life trauma. It can reduce. So, just in my own experience, to get to the point, I've been taught now how to relax my body and really become the observer of anxiety. So, I had 3 panic attacks, anxiety attacks / anxiety attacks in the last couple of weeks. And in each case, touch wood quickly, each case I was able to stand back and say, oh, well, anxiety, that's interesting. Boy, it's coming right out of my gut, coming right out of that spot. I wonder why it's coming out of there. Am I hungry? What's going on? And then also using Eckhart Tolle's thing about what will the mind think next, using that to get myself even further away from being overwhelmed, asking myself, what is my mind going to, or the mind, I should say, what is the mind going to give me next? What's the next thing that's going to happen in the mind? And where is it coming from? But all that ability has only really come through the use of EMDR to resolve some of the stuff from my childhood, and from hypnotherapy, because we worked a lot with archetypes, and having now, I guess we call protection of archetypes, which I had before, but didn't really understand what was going on, because after Shaktipat, you begin to have protectors. But I didn't know how to call on them. I didn't know how to do any of that stuff, which is really important. I think that you can ask them for help as things are happening, to call on them. You read a lot about that in Greek literature, like the Iliad. They're always calling on one god or goddess or another to help them, to give them strength, get them through something. And I hesitate to say that's what they are referring to, but it seems to be the same kind of thing. You're calling on powers outside of your own psyche, or sorry, within your psyche, but outside of your own conscious psyche. Anyhow, so that was all I had to say about that. But EMDR and hypnotherapy are really good to prepare yourself for the reliving of trauma and dissolving all that old karma. Anyhow.
Oh, fascinating, Tom. You've got a question here from Violet in the chat who's asking, I believe, about the Joe Dispenza meditations and the third eye. She says, how did you turn that off once it started? Did you turn to a guru for Shaktipat?
I wouldn't. I mean, turn to a guru for Shaktipat is great. If you want to do that, it's not necessarily going to do into your third eye. The only thing that will do something to your third eye, I think, would be to stop focusing on it, stop thinking about it, let it alone. Focus on your heart. If you're going to meditate, your eyes may be drawn automatically up to your third eye. That happens to me sometimes when the Shakti moves up to that third eye. But focus on heart and focus on devotion and bhakti. Just focus on love for everything, and even love for Joe Dispenza and the third eye. Love that too. Say thank you, or thank the goddess for giving you that experience, and ask her to maybe calm it down a bit because it's a bit intense. I can't really handle it, so please give me a gentler experience. That's all that I can tell you about that. But stop doing the pranayama, stop doing the Joe Dispenza breathing, stop doing pranayama for a while, and see how that affects you. And sometimes you don't do that. Okay. Well, then just wait it out but again, bhakti and focusing on your heart. And you can go to, my experience once long ago, before I received Shaktipat, I had a full-blown experience and was seeing things everywhere, hallucinating, and seeing all kinds of things. None of them were bad. They could be scary for some, but not for me, because I wasn't scared of those things. When I received Shaktipat from, I'll say, Guru Mai, it didn't stop those visions and things. What it did was it made them all logical. It took the chaos out of it and put it all into a into a tradition. And I was able I was able to handle it then, instead of having just, what's going on? This is great. This feels good, but I don't know what the hell's going on. Suddenly it put it all into a kind of perspective. It straightened it out, like having really frizzy hair and having it straightened. That's what happened. I can't think of another way of saying it. Somebody else might be more eloquent, but yeah, that would be the reason that I would get Shaktipat. And I did. And that's what happened. It all straightened out. Then I had some really wonderful visions of the life, etc. And goddess. Anyhow, yeah, that's all I could really tell you, Violet, is if you're going to get Shaktipat, that'd be a very good reason to get it. But that won't necessarily bring you to full enlightenment. The work still has to be done. What happens is a great amount of karma will be gotten rid of. If you have a moment, I was going I had 3 visions after receiving Shaktipat. I'll tell you the first. They were massive visions. First, I have a body like in the vision, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, and I'm wearing like what we call like Tarzan type loincloth. Behind me is a huge, heavy wagon with big wooden wheels, like massive wheels, like you see from medieval times or something. And in the wagon are huge boulders. It's full of boulders, and this thing is chained to me. And on my back also is chained a huge cross, like the thing you see. And I'm walking and dragging this behind me, dragging it. I come to it's very dry and arid. The whole world is arid. Walk to a town and walk through the gates. It's all dry. There's people lying around just doing nothing because they're so exhausted. There's a well in the middle of the town, which I approach. And before I get there, so I see that wagon is now empty. The boulders are missing. the chain breaks, that's chained me to the wagon, and the chain breaks and the cross falls off my back.
Mhm.
And so there's a nice, that's one of the things that happens. All that was karma. All that was, being nailed to the cross, being caught, stuck forever in the point where time and space intersect. Let's say this three-dimensional world. That's one of the symbols of one of the supposed ancient symbol of the cross is time and being or space. So that's gone. That doesn't mean I'm fully. I don't think it means I'm fully enlightened. I just really don't feel like it. But that, and I don't know if I'll escape rebirth. But sort of indication of what Shaktipat can do for you. It can dump huge amounts of karma, but then you still have to do the work. You can dump it, but there's always more. And every thought you get more karma with every. One of the reasons people spend so much time in caves, holding their breath, because holding breath stops the mind. Every time the mind goes and it runs away with you. You're building more karma. Apparently, that's what I've read. And so you have to work all that off too. Anyhow, yeah. So that's what Shaktipat might do. Probably will do, if that's what you want. If you do good Shaktipat, before you go to an intensive, formulate very clearly what you want from it all. What's your intention? That's a really important thing. Just going in there empty, well, you'll get something, but it won't necessarily be what you really, really want. Formulate what you really want. And then, well, best of luck to you. I think it's something that you can do or not. But like Brent was saying, if you're with a guru who's going to abandon you or just go back to India and you're not planning to spend time at the ashram, no, be careful what you wish for. Anyway, buyer beware. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Thank you for indulging my long-windedness.
Not at all. Thank you. Thank you. Lots of wisdom there. Lots of great counsel. Thank you, Tom. I've heard it from a few people, this similar story about Joe Dispenza and his work. Now, what I can say is Joe Dispenza is quite brilliant, quite brilliant. The other day I was speaking to somebody who just opened up a new restaurant. I was chatting with him, and he's the head chef. He designed the menu, all that kind of stuff. And he was telling me, I want to open a second location. But when I open the second location, I have to be willing for the quality of my food to go down, because I'm going to leave it to someone else is going to be making it at the second location. I can't be monitoring the quality at both places at the same time. And if I want to grow, I have to be willing for that to happen. So I noticed this phenomena happening with somebody like, say, Joe Dispenza. Gets really famous, and he can't do this. If the business wants to scale, he's got to get, a team of people to begin to also help him with the work. And the team of people, just like with the restaurant, they're not going to be, doing the exact same quality of work. The quality is going to be diminished. And so what I've heard from some is that they, maybe attend a retreat, they engage in some of these really powerful practices, and they're having powerful awakening experiences, and they're not supported at all. And it's very unfortunate. It's very, very unfortunate. They're having Kundalini phenomena, and the facilitators don't know what to do with these people, right? And this is an issue with scaling. It's an issue with scaling, and we could tie that into capitalism and how the integrity and money and all that kind of causes problems and all that kind of stuff for sure. But it just overall, this seems to be what happens as these teachings get more and more widespread. And so we definitely need to, use our discernment, all like we've been talking about today, use our discernment and whatnot, when considering some of these practices. Yeah. So let's go over here to Phoebe.
Hi, Brent. How's it going?
Hey, it's going good, Phoebe. How are you?
Not bad. Interesting. I'm sorry I missed the jump because I've missed out on the topic somewhat, but just having the two phases to the work that I've had with the gap in between, you know, I got to experiment in between with different healings and things. And I did things like, not quite innocent things like Reiki, and I was attuned to another type of Japanese healing modality to work on myself mostly, and then I would work on others sometimes as well. And I shouldn't have done that, because you don't actually know what you're being attuned to. And it's all very innocent, everyone rushing in for these things, and we're on the spiritual path, and we think that's what we're supposed to do. And my initial feelings were, well, I don't really know what I'm tapping into, you know, and I should have gone by that wisdom. But you're so, especially when you're unwell, you know, you're so desperate to heal. Of course, you have to try different things. So in this second episode, my body's been busy undoing my experimentation. And as my healer, who I followed into this lifetime, because she's the only one that works the way that she does, she just works with the body, because it has all the wisdom. It will know how to heal itself. It will let her know what it needs. And, you know, that's kept me going, and we're getting close to getting out the other side. There's still some time to go. Yeah, so that was a powerful thing of me learning discernment, you know, and I had some nasty psychic attacks and different things, and from people I was close to as well, but they were working with things and interchanneling and whatever. And they, you know, they were into things that seemed wonderful and loving and whatever, but they weren't. And it gave the opportunity for them to attack me innocently, like with a hug or whatever, you know. So yes, and I had major sensitivities to with the second, went down the second time, because my body's been taken down to nothing. 4 near-death experiences where, you know, your central nervous system collapses, because I've tried to stand up and I couldn't get enough blood pressure to my brain, and so you collapse your body, and that collapse actually like shreds the organs inside and all the tissue, and it's a long journey back to something reasonable. And the last one was just a flicker of the soul left in the body. So, you know, it's sort of been huge learning curves, but because of I was so weak, I was shown I couldn't even take phone calls from people or different people visiting, because they had nasty attachments or whatever, and they would sort of try and attack me, and my body had such little reserve to be able to defend me. It could only defend me for so long, and then I would feel it and I'd be overwhelmed, and like I would, you know, just go to the point of almost collapse, and it would take me days to recover. And, you know, once I start to feel it happen, well, in the end, I hardly had anyone visit. I've had to be really cocooned. But sometimes I've experimented, and, you know, someone's offered to come and visit, and it's been disastrous, because, you know, for so long the visit's all going well, and all of a sudden I can feel that they're trying to take my energy, and I have to sort of excuse myself, and, you know, because that offends everybody. It's terrible, but it's my discernment journey learning. That's how I put it. And what not to do. And it's been very much about just sticking with the body and the body wisdom. And I mean, that's okay for me to say, because I've got the healer that works the same way. And, you know, it's sort of cleaning up the mess, and I'm going forward. Yeah, but it's sort of, so for me, it's been the acupuncture, which is very hard to find someone that's good enough at that. They can actually do more harm. And the natural medicines. And I'm using different aspects of myself from different timelines. So I'm sort of at that point in my development where I'm able to do that. So, you know, I've brought in things like faith, you know, because to go down to all these things where you need death for so long. I mean, it's, you know, we're into the 8th year now. You know, even though I'm strong emotionally, I needed more help. So from a different timeline, there was me in that timeline that had more faith. So we pulled some of that across. And then recently I was given the gift of joy, and my body always asked me, do you want to bring this from that timeline and bring it, you know, and of course, yes, is the answer. So, and the other thing is, I work with flower essences a lot in the early years. I actually had kits of them. So I avoided, like if you're having a panic attack, well, it would just instantly stop it, you know. So I only ever had one of those, and I knew about the flower essences. So I never had to suffer anymore from those. So I ended up with a kit, and I learned kinesiology, and I would get the body to choose what flower essences she wanted for the day, and put so many drops of each one in water, and it would be, I'd ask her if she wanted them 2 or 3 times a day, things like that. So I avoided a lot of, so much release was just done easily working with those for years. And so that's another good thing. And then you get to a point where no, you don't need the flower essences anymore. I couldn't take the flower essences because they're preserved in alcohol or different things, and whatever it was, even though you're putting them into water and they're very diluted, my body could no longer tolerate even a sniff of alcohol. And so it was that, okay, the trainer wheels are off now, you can do it yourself, you don't need the flower essences anymore. And that's been true. So that's it was a step up. So that was really good to know. So, but now I'm down to having to work so closely with the body, like getting enough blood to my brain every day is such a challenge. So there's different mudras to do for that. So I sort of get up in the morning, I have to do that. And any breath work I do is just very, very gentle, just something like breathe into the count of 4, breathe out, all of that, just 4 simple breathing, nothing heavy, because that just throws you out of kilter. I tried a bit of pranayama, and that was just after one session, that was a no-no. That really threw me out. So yeah, and it's just everything is bringing me back to the body. So I'm even having to work to manually get enough water into the cells of the body and get enough oxygen into the cells of the body. And I'm doing that all with mudras, with a little bit of gentle breath work, but mostly mudras. So yeah, very much bringing me back to, no, you're going to be doing all this yourself. And while I'm doing this, I'm creating new healing pathways for my lineage as well. So, anyone that's, I've done a lot of work with getting cancer out for the lineage. And so anyone else going down with that, the pathway out is there if they're willing to do the work. So, yes, so it's amazing what we're achieving, but really I've just had to avoid so much stuff that you would think was good. Even to listen to something on YouTube, like healing music, I have to let the body select that, because that could be interference as well. So we just have to be more, really having to develop our discernment, and we're probably some of the forerunners that are going to be doing this, and we need to speak of it, so it just gives others more information.
Incredible. Thank you, Phoebe. Thank you so much for sharing. It sounds like you've got quite the sensitivity and the intuition to connect with your body. Did you say that you had 4 near-death experiences?
There's actually been a number over my lifetime, because I started preparing for this when I was 10 years of age. People that are going to do some heavy evolutionary work will have to open up channels in the body, and that's usually done by accidents. You'll have spinal and head injuries. So, I've had a sporting accident when I was 10, sort of hit the pavement and got concussed. That was the first one. Then a horse riding accident when I was 16. That was very close, very, very close. I was lucky to get out of that quite very well, actually. And then at the age of 60, when I'm about ready to do some more work, I've had no accidents in between whatsoever. And then I have an accident where I end up landing on my head. And I heard my skull crack, but no one could find anything when I had tests and everything done. But I knew that there was a crack sound, something had happened. And when the Kundalini energy came up again for the second time, I ended up with concussion and brain stem stuff going on. I mean, I couldn't move my neck for months. It was all my incredible practitioner with all her acupuncture that, got all that unraveled. I thought, I've done so much damage here. I'm not going to be able to sort of ever get up and be mobile again. So, to do all this sort of damage to the body, at this late stage in life is pretty extreme, and then you've got to try and come out the other side of it. So, and that's hence why I work with other aspects from other timelines to try and help me.
Very, very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for sharing about those. I know it might be difficult to speak about. There's something about near-death experiences that seems like people have like just more than one, like very often. It's kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Very
yeah,
interesting.
It seems to be, it's definitely tied into our evolution. It's as I said, with the falls and the spinal and the head injuries, well, that's opening up pathways that we know and understand that. But other, they're all really shaking the body up, aren't they? So, and opening it up, and even like with my collapses of the central nervous system collapsing. I mean, the first one, my heart nearly gave out. I just thought, like, I'm a goner, and luckily, my practitioner only works 3 days a week, but she was there, and I got there, and because she's intuitive and she's got the body communicating with her, she said to me, no, you're going to make it. And so we just worked, and sort of 9 months later, I was up being able to move around a bit, and I moved around too much and crashed again, and that's just kept happening. So yeah, and it's just for some reason my body has had to be taken down to nothing. And it's all very interesting too, because there's astrology involved too, because I'm going through a Saturn return, and we know the end date things for that as well. And my practitioner and myself, like, I'm old enough to be her mother, but our birthdays are on the same day, so you can just see how things are intertwined. There's nothing, it's probably very calculated, I would say.
Fascinating. Fascinating. Thank you so much for sharing, BB. I see here in the chat, going back to talking about Joe Dispenza, Shane shares here, my Kundalini experience came through using Joe Dispenza's meditation daily for 18 months, just from my home. I still do them today, but it's true, I had to work out spiritual psychosis. Yeah. Powerful practices, for sure. Powerful practices. Quincy's sharing here, there's a form of breath work called soma. It's not vigorous or forceful, but I've had the same effects from doing that, if anyone is interested. Interesting.
So I had this question. So there's this particular number that's been following me all around everywhere I go, and I don't know what it means. Like, I think I know, but I don't know for sure. So the number is 68 or even 86. It can be both. So the other day, so I've been trying to open my heart, because that's what I've been told to open. So one day I took my mom to Central Island, and there was this guy on the boat who was taking us to the island. I just started to talk to him, and he told me to, hey, you should open your heart. He just said that out of nowhere. He turned to me and he said, you should open your heart. He turns out he was a psychic, and his higher self was coming through him and telling me to open my heart. So, and if you ever look at the symbol of heart chakra, it's a triangle. It's two triangles. It has 6 points. So I think the number 6 relates to my heart center, and also the 8 is for abundance. But and I've been trying to manifest abundance in my life. Yeah. So I when I grew up, when I was very young, we were always in debt, and I had this very childhood trauma about money. Like, I felt there was a subconscious blockage there, and there was this 888 portal, like few days back, and everyone was talking about it. I didn't really care that much, but on that day I had a full my heart chakra opening. I was in Niagara Falls with my mother, and we were bonding, and we were on the boat, and I saw the falls, and you know, my mom started to scream like out of joy. My mom loves nature, so she was screaming, and I stopped watching the falls, and I was watching my mom, and my heart just opened up there,
Yeah.
and I was like completely blissed out. I was laughing like crazy. And so the thing is, what do I do with this number? It's following me everywhere, but I don't know. I have no direction, and I can't even talk to my higher self for some reason. I don't know. We have this space now. We don't talk anymore.
Well, maybe some others have some thoughts for Tirth. I know some maybe very much into numerology and whatnot. Personally, I was getting completely overwhelmed with synchronicity of all kinds. I was losing my mind to the point of like an existential crisis type of thing. I couldn't solve it. I couldn't figure it out. Eventually, I boiled it down to just any synchronicity I find, it's a sign I'm in the right place. Keep going. So now I don't let it bother me. I appreciate it, but I don't get too involved like a, like a private investigator or something trying to figure out, oh, what does all this mean? But that's my take on it. I also am a bit of a lazy person in that regard. So I just say, oh, okay, I don't need to go crazy over this. Because I did before. But it sounds like you're being guided and you're having these incredible experiences. The Center Island boatman is telling you to open your heart. It's a bit
Yeah.
unusual, but clearly things are going well for you.
Also, is there some particular meditation or particular frequency to open up the heart? Because right now I used to meditate for like 10-20 minutes, and I don't know what happened, but suddenly like I'm like very drawn to meditation. I just do lots of meditation throughout the day. I spent like, I don't know, 3-4 hours a day meditating. I was never like this. I didn't do it like this, but somehow it's like everything's like, coming in. I'm going deep in my heart. And is there a specific frequency or something that I could use to, open up my heart?
Well, I'm curious if others have some thoughts as well. I can share, my practice, which was just putting my hands on my heart and saying over and over, I love you. That was the auditory component. There was a visual component, which was imagining liquid light love emanating from my heart to the top of my head, to the bottom of my feet, touching everything. And that was the visual component, feeling that with a sort of body scan type meditation. So that was my practice. And the way that I sort of understood what it means to have an open heart, which means that the heart opens. And when it opens, that means things can pass through it. It's like opening a window or opening a door. So emotions, thoughts, feelings, everything can pass through it without judgment, without saying, oh, no, not you, everything. So that's what I've come to understand for myself. So maybe one along those lines, you can think of, how do we open our hearts? Well, we give ourselves permission to feel, give ourselves permission to think, have all the experiences. So that can be one way of doing it, because that's what an open heart is. So we can, practice like that. Maybe some others have some thoughts on how to open heart. But I mean, it sounds like you had quite a profound heart opening at, Niagara Falls, one of the Earth's power points, power places.
Yeah, also the car in which we went there, when the car was coming, sorry to interrupt you. When the car was coming, we were standing, it was a ride share, and we were standing waiting for the car. And I told my sister, if the car comes and it's 68 number car, I'll start laughing. And 2 minutes later, the car came, it was 68 number car, of course.
Yeah, fascinating. Yeah, you've got some practices being shared in the chat here. 639 hertz is the frequency for the heart chakra. Lots of options on YouTube. Good for meditation or background noise. Interesting. Serpent Power shares here. Yearning for the divine opens the heart. Feel yourself filled with love for God.
Okay.
Amazing. Yeah, bhakti, right? Bhakti practices. Yeah, Niagara Falls is a powerful place. Speaking of near-death experiences earlier with Phoebe, now you had your heart opening at Niagara Falls. Dr. Yvonne Cason, she's one of the earliest researchers of Kundalini, as well as near-death experiences. I've got an interview with her on my channel, and she had really significant near-death experiences at Niagara Falls. She slipped and fell on some black ice, banged her head, so had like a traumatic brain injury, had a pretty interesting near-death experience over there at the falls. Yeah, she's done some great work. She's got some good books out. You can check out that interview I did with her on my channel. Catsy's got a joke here. Who falls at Niagara Falls? Yeah, it's
Hey Brent, How are you tonight?
I'm good, Brandon. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you. Good to see you again. I've got a question for you and for others to chime in as well. And it's not on a heavy note, it's not on an overly light note, but I am curious when you look at recurring themes that individuals experience when they feel that Shakti rising. And so it takes a number of times for us to get smacked upside the head, to finally listen, and to listen in new ways, right? This is one of the things I've been working through is moving past identification, moving past intellectualization, starting to understand and comprehend, but then truly actualizing. And so as I look at it from a maturing perspective and know that I've got a long ways to go, I think about, in the rearview mirror, how many times were there signs? How many times was that Shakti rising, introducing pain, trying to get me to move at that point? And so just when you think about your own journey, when others think about theirs, what's that kind of recurring theme that we can point to and say, this was the thing that I think I started to do again, that either introduced a window for me to take another leap in a positive growth way, kind of a accretive effect, if you will, or hey, knucklehead, it's time to get back to what you were practicing before. So anyway, it's just something that's been on my mind. I'm curious to get some thoughts on it.
It's a great question. It's a great question. I guess the main theme that comes to me when I think about, that whole idea is I see that this process is working towards making us, in generally speaking, more kind, open-hearted, compassionate, empathetic people. And so every time I would catch myself trying to control people and it wasn't working out, that would push me, like you said, out the window where I had to realize I cannot control people. This is God in disguise trying to get me to stop controlling God. I have to remember that. And so it was very humbling experience. And it can still happen, of course. So that was a major theme with me. It was just basically realizing, like, I'm not here to control people. I'm not here to tell people what to do or how they should think or get them to behave in a way that I need them to behave. I need to just relax and trust and find a different approach. So that was a theme that kept kind of coming up for me. I know maybe I won't speak for others too much, but I know some others that maybe, they're meant to rest and they just keep trying to go get into different projects and the projects don't work. And so they're forced to rest and they realize, okay, fine, I'll rest. Or some it's sickness or something like that. These things can happen. Yeah, I'm curious about others' thoughts. Yeah, that's a great question there, Brandon.
Oh, thanks for your thoughts on it, Brent. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Have you had any other themes like that? Like, have you noticed it with multiple themes on your journey?
Oh, yeah, I was ready to ask the question. I wasn't ready to be asked. So you're going to get a raw, honest answer. I honestly, I feel like it is kind of in line with your response. If I start to feel a little bit too comfortable, if I start to feel, and maybe confident goes along with that comfort. But if I feel like, okay, things are going well, that's usually kind of a surrounding condition to when a new test comes up, new form of pain, former form of pain, whatever it is. That's something that I have noticed. And I forget which podcast episode it was of yours, but I was going back through the other day listening to a couple, and you had one, it was, so you want to be a spiritual leader, a spiritual teacher, right?
Mm.
And there was a litmus test type of question that you had in there that I went over to my whiteboard and wrote it down. It's like, this is very helpful for me to boil it down to the essence. And it essentially was, are you channeling source with this? So are you being called and pulled purely in this direction? Or are you the person? Are you the one that is, so you're getting into wants and shoulds and it's your will again. So similar to what you just said with trying to control people, I bring it back and say, for me, times that I try to control the process and the outcome, even if it's close, it can come through as kind of a fool's disguise. It's like, no, but this is through good intention. This is in the direction that I'm feeling called and pulled in, right? And so that's something that I think that I've noticed in these later chapters of personal growth.
Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you for sharing. Yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for that. Yeah, vulnerable answer that I think we can all relate to, because in some respects, all of us are light workers here, and it's the next frontier of growth, and it irons out a lot of our you know, the parts of us that need to be ironed out, to put it that way. Yeah.
Right.
I
The good
heard
stuff.
yeah, there was I used to really be into hardcore punk, and there's a band, Youth of Today. Um the singer, what's his name? Ray Capo. Yeah, Ray Capo. He's like a devotee of Krishna. In hardcore punk, there's actually like this whole movement of like very devout uh members of uh Krishna consciousness. And one thing he was saying about when he would perform live on stage, he had asked another singer or something like that. He said, when you go on stage, are you on there to serve God, or are you on there to be God? And that's when I understood, this is not about being God. This is about serving God. So if we're given an opportunity to be a teacher or a singer of a hardcore punk band or whatever it may be, you know, that's where it got me thinking about this. You know, what is really the motivations behind this? And, you know, I would like to say I'm here to serve, but I can admit there's part of me that wants to get something out of this too, of course, yeah, you know. So it's part of the game. It's part of the game. As long as we
Yeah.
bring awareness to it. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm happy we can relate on those points, Brandon. Thank you for sharing. And I know,
Thank
you
you.
know, we're definitely not alone here on those things.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brent.
Thank you. Serpent Power's got a response here to your question here, I think. For me, I came to the point where I was being lived rather than living. I had this knowing of everything without any intellect conceptualizing anything. Very interesting. Knowing me sharing here, not needing to label anything and learning to accept your process as it is. I have a tendency to intellectualize and interpret me talking what I'm going through. We don't need to overanalyze anything, especially to the brain. Our brain wants to know why, when sometimes all we need to do is sit in our body and in our heart. Your intuition and your heart is not in your head. Let go of the why and just be. Beautiful. BB sharing here, my long-term situation is also very much about surrender. I'm going through my second Saturn return, and Saturn will take your legs out from underneath you. When this began, I had electric shocks to the back of the brain and my knees giving way. Saturn is a strict spiritual master, I have heard, and it lines up with my experience. Interesting. Reminds me of, well, speaking of music, it reminds me of Tool's song, The Grudge, has these themes of Saturn, Saturn's return and whatnot. I don't know much about astrology, so I won't say more than that. Fantastic song, though, Tool, The Grudge. Okay. Thank you all so much for sharing, supporting one another today. Violet's got a response here about opening the heart with metta loving kindness meditation. Also incredibly, incredibly powerful. Reciting loving mantras, focusing on the energy of love. Amazing. I simply imagine that I'm radiating heart-centered love to myself, then to my immediate family, my neighbors, then I just keep going love to everyone around the world, then out into the universe. Yes. Practice of metta. Beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to type some links in the chat here. We'll begin to wind down tonight. Thank you all so much for joining and sharing, supporting one another. Appreciate you all. Appreciate you all. Tomorrow, Kundalini Q&A meeting. See you there, Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern. If you'd like to offer a donation to support me in doing this work, I appreciate it. I really do. Thank you. Thank you. Got my course out that we were speaking about a little bit earlier. Samia was speaking about grounded spiritual emergence and integration. You can check that out if you're feeling like you need some grounding. Got some time slots available for some one-to-one meetings later this month. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you all so much. Appreciate you all. Much love, everybody. Get some sleep now. Get some sleep. Have a good week. And we'll see you soon. Bye now. Much love. Much love.